The death and funeral of Queen Charlotte. By early 1811, King George was already experiencing vision loss and enduring intense physical suffering from severe ailments, separate from his mental illness. He was confined to a serene and isolated section of Windsor Castle. At first, the Queen would occasionally visit him there, accompanied by one or more of his caretakers or her children. However, his increasingly erratic and peculiar behaviour frightened and saddened her to such extent that she ceased visiting him after the summer of 1812. As her husband descended further into madness, her own demeanour began to change as well. Alongside growing depression, the Queen also underwent frequent and unpredictable mood swings. These ongoing fluctuations in her character strained her relationships with her children, courtiers and close friends. Gradually, Queen Charlotte started to retreat from public life, dedicating more and more of her time to her country residence, Frogmore House, located on the Windsor Castle grounds. During the later years of her life, she did make a significant effort to mend her relationships with her children, including the Prince of Wales. Regrettably, Queen Charlotte never had a particularly strong bond with her granddaughter, who shared her name, Princess Charlotte of Wales. Princess Charlotte held a deep affection for her grandfather, King George, who had always shown her great kindness. However, her grandmother, Queen Charlotte, consistently presented herself as a cold and strict authority figure, beginning from when the princess was a young girl growing up with largely indifferent parents. Despite the strain in their relationship, Queen Charlotte was overjoyed upon hearing the news of her granddaughter's pregnancy. The Queen understood that the child would secure the throne for her husband's family in the next generation. Therefore, the death of the Princess Charlotte during childbirth in November of 1817 was a tremendous blow to the Queen. Her health noticeably began to decline following the loss of her granddaughter and great-grandson. By the spring of 1818, Queen Charlotte started experiencing sporadic seizures without any clear physical explanation according to her doctors. Having reached the age of 74 that May, she was no longer a young woman and was ultimately diagnosed with dropsy. Her strength began to wane, and by summer, walking became increasingly challenging for the Queen. Her joints often ached severely and her legs frequently swelled. In July of 1818, two of her younger sons, who had recently married German princesses, returned to Britain with their new brides. A double wedding ceremony for the royal couples was scheduled to take place at Windsor Castle later that month. The Queen intended to travel from London to Windsor in order to attend her son's double wedding, with the hope of recovering her health at the country retreat, Frogmore House. Unfortunately, her illness worsened during the journey, rendering her too frail and weak to continue. Consequently, her entourage made a stop at Dutch House, also known as Kew Palace, situated within the grounds of Kew Gardens, allowing the Queen to rest and regain her strength. After a few days, as it became evident that the ailing Queen was not improving, it was decided to hold the weddings for the Duke of Clarence and the Duke of Kent in the drawing room of Dutch House on Saturday the 11th of July 1818. The Prince Regent and several of his siblings attended the ceremony, and Queen Charlotte was carefully carried downstairs and placed in a chair that provided her a view of her sons and brides exchanging vows in English. She managed to greet the members of the intimate wedding party and spent a brief moment with them after the ceremony. However, Queen Charlotte's weakness prevented her from attending the elegant outdoor wedding breakfast held in Kew Gardens. As the wedding party made their way into the gardens, the Queen was carried back upstairs to her bedchamber. The Queen in her attune remained at Kew Palace throughout the summer. Over the following weeks, the Prince Regent and most of her other children visited her. In August, she was carried out to the gardens in her carriage for a short outing on most days, and everyone hoped that she would soon regain enough strength to continue her journey to Windsor Castle. But she remained too feeble and delicate to be transported. Queen Charlotte received care from Sir Francis Milman and Sir Henry Halford, both of whom were appointed as physicians to the king. They periodically provided updates on the Queen's health during her stay at Kew Palace, bulletins that were issued. The Queen has had several hours of sleep again, but it does not appear to have had any visible impact on her state and Her Majesty's condition. Throughout the rest of the summer and early autumn, the unmarried princesses and most of the princes made multiple visits to Dutch House, hoping to uplift their mother's spirits. It seemed that during these visits the Queen was able to mend her relationships with her children, and even the Prince Regent made several trips to Kew during those weeks to spend time with his mother. There were moments when the Queen seemed to rally, and her family held hope that her health was slowly improving. However, tragically, she developed a severe case of pneumonia, which her weakened state made it difficult to combat. On the morning of Tuesday, the 17th of November 1818, the Queen's physicians Milman and Halford issued the following bulletin. The Queen's condition last night was extremely critical and precarious. Her Majesty remains very ill this morning. The same update on the Queen's health was conveyed directly to the royal family, prompting those who could travel to Kew Palace for what they anticipated would be their final visit with their family matriarch. When her family arrived, Queen Charlotte expressed a desire to leave her bed, and her servants carefully carried her to her armchair near the fireplace. Her two eldest sons, the Regent and the Duke of York, were present in her bedchamber that afternoon, accompanied by two of her daughters, Princess Augusta and Princess Mary. They sat together, engaging in quiet conversation for a while, and the Regent sat beside his mother and held her hand. At around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she took a long breath and passed away. The following day, the following statement was released to the public. Her Majesty passed away around 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 17th of November 1818, at the age of 74. Her demise resulted from a gradual accumulation of fluid in her limbs and chest, which no medications could alleviate. Despite a lengthy illness, she faced it with remarkable fortitude and resignation, bringing an end to her life. At the time of her death, Queen Charlotte held the record as Britain's longest-serving royal consort. However, she recently relinquished that title when the current Duke of Edinburgh surpassed the tenure, making her the second longest-serving royal consort. Although her husband, King George III, had been alive during her passing, he suffered from blindness, near-deafness, lameness, dementia, and his ongoing mental illness. It remains uncertain whether he was informed of her death, and even if he had been, his ability to comprehend such news would have been highly unlikely. Several days were devoted to planning the funeral arrangements, and during this period the Queen's body was prepared for burial at Kew Palace, where it lay in state of mourning privately for approximately 2 days. Then, at approximately 9 o'clock in the morning of Wednesday the 2nd of December 1818, the Queen's coffin was draped in a black pall and placed in a hearse drawn by 8 black Hanoverian horses belonging to the Queen herself, for the final journey to Windsor, passing through London. The procession included multiple carriages pulled by black horses, which would carry the Prince Regent and his brothers to the funeral service. Mounted lancers formed an honorary guard accompanying the procession to Frogmore House, the Queen's country retreat. Around 7 o'clock in the evening, upon reaching Frogmore House, the Prince Regent, assuming the role of chief mourner, took his place in the first carriage following the hearse. His brothers then accompanied the other carriages, and the chief servants of the King, Queen, Prince of Wales and the royal family, all attired in deep mourning attire of scarlet livery and black scarves and hatbands, joined the procession, each carrying a lit flambeau. Following them were 40 yeomen of guard, followed by the mounted trumpeters and kettle drummers of the horse guards. On foot, the foot guards marched with their 50s and drums. The death of Caroline of Brunswick. Caroline of Brunswick, also known as Caroline Amelia Elizabeth, lived from the 17th of May 1768 to the 7th of August 1821. She held the titles of Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and Queen of Hanover from the 29th of January 1820 until her passing in 1821. Caroline was married to King George IV, but their relationship was strained, and they had separated shortly after the birth of their only child, Princess Charlotte. Caroline was originally engaged to her cousin George, Prince of Wales, whom she had never met prior to their engagement. Despite George's existing illegal marriage to Maria Fitzherbert, he married Caroline in 1795. However, rumours about Caroline having affairs and illegitimate children led to an inquiry into her personal life in 1806, though it was concluded that there was no evidence to support these claims. Despite this, Caroline's access to her daughter remained restricted. Caroline of Brunswick experienced a swift downfall from her once high-standing position. Her erratic behaviour during George's coronation led to a rapid decline in her popularity among the people, who openly mocked and jeered her as she left the coronation venue. However, this marked only the onset of her troubles. So how did this queen die? Caroline's descent into illness marked the onset of a dark chapter in her tumultuous life. Following a harrowing day that left her nerves frayed, she returned home only to find herself succumbing to a grave sickness as twilight enveloped the horizon. Desperate for relief, she turned to remedies like milk of magnesia and drops of laudanum, hoping for respite in slumber. Yet fate seemed intent on thwarting her plans at every turn. As weeks dragged on, Caroline confronted a grim reality. Her health showed no signs of improvement. Instead, it spiraled towards an ominous conclusion. With time slipping through her fingers, she embarked on a sombre task of arranging her affairs, preparing for the inevitable. However, amidst this tortuous journey, she hurled startling accusations into the ether, alleging a sinister plot orchestrated against her. Throughout her ordeal, Caroline adamantly professed suspicions of poisoning, igniting murmurs that pointed accusatory fingers towards none other than King George IV himself. The timing of her affliction seemed too convenient, fueling speculation that it served the monarch's interest to rid himself of his troublesome consort. Nevertheless, historical inquiry has yielded alternative explanations, shrouding the truth in enigma. While Caroline's own physicians diagnosed her with an intestinal obstruction, wreaking havoc upon her body, contemporary experts talk about the possibility of a clandestine battle with cancer. Regardless of the precise nature of her affliction, her demise unfolded as a poignant tragedy, leaving behind a legacy strained with intrigue and sorrow. On a fateful August night, the clocks tolled the hour of 10:25 p.m., marking the untimely passing of Caroline of Brunswick within the confines of her residence. In the twilight of her 53rd year, she departed from this world, leaving behind a legacy packed with scandal and strife, a testament to the tempestuous existence that she led. Yet, even in death, Caroline managed to stir the embers of controversy, ensuring that her name would linger in the annals of history as a provocateur beyond the grave. Caroline of Brunswick, renowned for her penchant for drama, orchestrated a sensational exit that left an undeniable mark on history. Prior to her departure, she meticulously purged her possessions, consigning her memoirs, notebooks, and letters to flames, ensuring that King George IV would never unearth her most guarded secrets to tarnish her reputation. Yet her posthumous manoeuvres surpassed even this audacious act. With a flair for the dramatic, Caroline meticulously choreographed the details of her funeral, leaving behind a final decree that epitomized her defiance. The inscription she prescribed for her tombstone epitomized her unyielding spirit. Here lies Caroline, the injured Queen of England, serving as an enduring reminder of her unwavering resistance against the injustices inflicted upon her by the king. However, her defiance did not cease with her passing. In a final act of rebellion, Caroline incited tumult even in her death. As her funeral procession traversed the streets, ministers of George's regime diverted the route in anticipation of unrest among her mourners. Yet this manoeuvre backfired spectacularly, incensing the crowds further. Street chaos ensued, and enraged commoners pelting the honour guard with projectiles, resulting in the tragic loss of 2 civilian lives. Although unconventional, this tumultuous display of emotion resonated deeply with Caroline's penchant for the dramatic. Caroline's tumultuous saga transcended her era, captivating the imagination of contemporaries and posterity alike. The bitter feud between her and George seized the collective consciousness of the UK, permeating every part of society. William Hazlitt, a prominent critic of the time, remarked on the pervasive influence of their discord, noting its profound impact on the fabric of the nation. Caroline's life, though brief, was a canvas painted with the vibrant hues of drama and intrigue. Her illness marked the final act of a tumultuous existence, where suspicions and accusations intertwined with the harsh realities of mortality. In her passing, she left behind a legacy that transcended the confines of her era, etching her name undeniably into the pages of history as a figure whose enigmatic presence continues to captivate generations to come. The death of Queen Adelaide. In the twilight of her life, Queen Adelaide was besieged by illness that reflected the turbulent times that she lived through. Though she briefly recovered from a serious illness in April 1837, her health troubles continued to shadow her life. Her devoted presence beside her ailing husband, King William IV, until his death in June 1837, exemplified her enduring strength amidst personal suffering. As a Queen Dowager, Adelaide's battle with chronic illness persisted, leading her to frequently move in search of a healthier environment. Despite these efforts, she spent her final years very poorly, her life marked by both the compassion she showed to others and her own physical frailties. In the spring of 1837, Queen Adelaide faced a dire health crisis that nearly claimed her life. At the same time, she was enduring the emotional strain of being with her mother in her final moments in Menningen. Miraculously, she managed to recover from her own illness. However, only a few months later, her husband, King William IV, began to succumb to his own grave health issues. With unwavering dedication, Adelaide spent over 10 days at his side, foregoing sleep and comfort to be with him as he faced his final hours. Her dedication did not wane, even as she grappled with her own frail health. King William IV ultimately passed away from heart failure in the early morning hours of the 20th of June 1837 at Windsor Castle, where he was later buried. This event marked a significant shift in the British monarchy as Victoria was proclaimed Queen. There was a small possibility that Adeline was pregnant, which could have affected the succession, but this turned out to not be the case. Following the king's death, Adelaide became the first Queen Dowager in over a century, a title last held by Catherine of Braganza, Charles II's widow, who died in 1705, and Mary of Modena, the spouse of the deposed James II, who died in 1718. Adelaide outlived her husband by 12 years, navigating life with resilience despite ongoing health challenges. In pursuit of a more suitable climate for her health, Adelaide embarked on a journey to Malta in October 1838 aboard HMS Hastings. The trip included a stop at Gibraltar before settling in Malta for a 3-month stay. Finding no Protestant church on the island, Adelaide funded the construction of St. Paul's Pro-Cathedral in Valletta, demonstrating her commitment to her faith and community even while away from home. Her travels did not end in Malta, and in the summer of 1844 Adelaide returned to her homeland for what would be her last visit. She travelled to Kew Palace and again to Menningen, perhaps reconnecting with her roots and family memories. Throughout her life, Adelaide maintained residences at prestigious locations, including Marlborough House, which she held from 1831 until her death in 1849, and Bushey House and its expansive Bushey Park at Hampton Court. These residences served not just as homes, but as places where she could receive guests and conduct her duties as Queen Dowager. Queen Adeline's later years were marked by a continuous search for comfort and health as she dealt with her ailments. She often moved between various residences, seeking the solace and restoration that each new environment promised. Her life was a testament to her resilience and dedication, both to her personal health and her public responsibilities. Despite the challenges, she remained a figure of strength and compassion, involved in her community and committed to her faith until the end of her days. By 1846, Adelaide moved to Castlebury House, which she rented from Lord Essex. This period was notable for her hospitality, as she hosted Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, showing her continued involvement in royal duties, despite her health. After 2 years, her quest for a better living situation took her to Bentley Priory in Stanmore, rented from Lord Abercorn, where she would eventually spend her final days. As her health continued to decline, in 1847, Adelaide was advised to spend the winter in Madeira, a place famed for its mild climate. While there, she not only sought recovery but also engaged in philanthropy. She donated money to the local poor and financed the construction of a road, thus contributing to the infrastructure of the island. Despite her failing health, Queen Adelaide made her last public appearance with a significant act of charity and faith. She laid the foundation stone for the Church of St. John in Great Stanmore, also donating the font for the church. After her death, the east window of the church was dedicated to her memory, honouring her contributions. Adelaide passed away on the 2nd of December 1849 during the reign of her niece, Queen Victoria. Her death occurred naturally at Bentley Priory in Middlesex. Due to her humble nature, she had previously penned down her wishes for her funeral during an illness in 1841, requesting a simple and private ceremony, free from any pomp or grand state display. She expressed a desire for peace and modesty, wishing her funeral to reflect the tranquility with which she had hoped to enter the afterlife. Accordingly, she was interred quietly in the royal vault at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, following her own directives for simplicity and humility. This approach to her final farewell reflected her lifelong values of humility and the importance of spiritual over worldly wealth. On the 11th of December 1849, while at Osborne House, Queen Victoria wrote a heartfelt letter to the King of Belgium about the passing of Queen Adelaide. In her letter she said, "I know how you would mourn with us over the death of our beloved Queen Adelaide. We have lost the kindest and dearest of friends, and the universal feeling of sorrow, of regret, and of real appreciation of her character is very touching and gratifying." Through her words, Queen Victoria conveyed deep sorrow and a sense of loss, noting that many people now deeply appreciated Adelaide, perhaps more than they had while she was alive. This sentiment was echoed in an anecdote about an English artist who once painted Adeline. He noticed her eyes were red and asked if the light was hurting her. Adelaide responded that her tears were not because of the light, but because she had cried a lot. This exchange revealed the depth of her unspoken struggles and hinted that she deserved far better than the hardships she faced. Queen Adelaide's life, marred by recurring illness, drew to a close on the 2nd of December 1849. She passed away quietly as she had wished, avoiding the pomp and circumstance typical of royal funerals, in accordance with her instructions for a modest and private burial. Adelaide was laid to rest in the royal vault at St. James's Chapel, leaving behind a legacy of benevolence and humility that was only fully appreciated after her demise. Her gentle nature and the challenges she faced in her final years evoke a poignant reflection on the quiet yet profound impact that she had. Her story is a testament to the enduring strength and compassion in the face of unrelenting personal health challenges.